Was ist Yiddish? Und wer redet Yiddish? Yiddish ist eine Yiddish-Sprache oder Mameloschen von den Yiddish Menschen. Yiddish, well, Jewish, as Yiddish means Jewish in Yiddish, is an Indo-European language, more specifically a Germanic language that is spoken by 100,000 to 200,000 people worldwide today, primarily by the Hasidim and other Haredim communities. It's a combination of primarily High German with some Middle German, Hebrew, Aramaic, Polish, Ukrainian, and a few Romance languages. Although that really depends on the dialects you're talking about. Yes, there are dialects, which does make things more confusing, but as always, in order to understand the language, we need to go back a minute. Like a fat minute. Boom is somewhere between 300 and 500 AD, the Middle Ages basically, and the Jews have settled along what we know as the Rhine Valley. Due to their emphasis on record keeping and literacy, many Jews were successful in setting up shop to do business with the locals across the Rhine. Over time, the Jews started to migrate out into Germany, and for a long time, Romans forbade anyone from crossing over into what we call Germany. The Romans portrayed them as savages, and that they were unfit for civilized people. However, since the collapse of Rome, the Jewish people started to venture in and out of modern Germany and do a little business with the local Germanic peoples. At this time, many of them spoke what we call Judeo-French and Judeo-Italian. Not much is going on linguistically in terms of Yiddish until the Jews get kicked out of France in the early 11th century and are forced to move east into Western Germany. Shortly after, we see the emergence of Western Yiddish, a combination of High and Middle German with Aramaic, Hebrew, and a little French and Italian. Western Yiddish was primarily spoken in northern and central Germany as well as in the Netherlands. Not long after, the Jews kinda got kicked out of many places across Europe, so they kept migrating in search of a new home. Scandinavia was simply too cold, so they migrated east to Poland, Lithuania, Hungary, and the Ukraine. As they settled into their new homes, they once again started setting up shop and doing business with the locals. However, at the time, many people throughout Eastern Europe, such as Poland, were poor peasants and weren't very literate. For the migrating Jews, it didn't make much sense to adopt a new language that few people could read or write in, so they kept Yiddish as their primary language. Over time, of course, they picked up some loan words, and now we have Eastern Yiddish. Between the 16th and 19th century, we start to see the widespread use of Yiddish. Books, plays, essays, and academic research was all written in Yiddish. While speakers of Eastern, Western, and a couple more dialects had difficulty choosing which dialect to write in, the Yiddish writing system used Hebrew letters, and for the most part, the difference wasn't really that large. During the 19th century, Eastern Yiddish pretty much became the dominant language of the literature that was produced. Talks of socialist revolution and anarchism became more and more popular with the publishing of The Conquest of Bread, and this aroused the media and printing press, and Yiddish speakers began adopting words like socialism and revolutie. In fact, Yiddish started becoming so popular that it was even supported in the early days of the Soviet Union during the 1920s. The Soviets allowed Yiddish speakers to publish books, academic papers, and essays in Yiddish as long as it wasn't promoting religion. So let's take a little break from history and talk about the language itself. If we're talking about Yivo, or standard Yiddish, it's generally phonetic, and you might find it a lot easier to pick up than Hebrew, for example. The alphabet, or Aleph base, looks pretty much the same, except vowels are used a little differently. For example, the Kometz Aleph, which in Hebrew has a A sound, is pronounced in Yiddish with an O sound, as in Heus, or home. Yiddish and German sound very similar, and in fact many can understand each other quite well. Of course, Yiddish has some vocabulary that is just non-existent in German. For instance, the word for hello is Sholem Aleichem, and the word for Saturday is Shabbos. Another way to say hi in Yiddish is tak, which is from the Polish word tak, meaning yes or go ahead. Linguistically, it hasn't developed much, and this is because many current speakers of the language live in culturally isolated communities across the world. Many consider it to be a dying language, and while the number of secular Jews speaking Yiddish is declining, the number of Haredim or Orthodox Jews speaking the language is actually doing quite well. Many children's books have been published in Hasidic Yiddish, spoken by the Hasidim. Linguistically, it isn't as phonetic as academic Yiddish, but the two are still quite similar when spoken. Going back to the history, during the eve of the Holocaust, there were around 13 million Yiddish speakers worldwide. It's estimated that roughly 5 million of the 6 million Jews who were killed during the Holocaust were Yiddish speakers. After the war, many survivors immigrated to Israel and the United States and Canada. Those who went to Israel mostly adopted modern Hebrew and assimilated to Israeli culture. Those who came to the United States and Canada didn't really speak Yiddish at home in fear of possible anti-Semitism. It's for this reason that Yiddish is considered an endangered language. I created this video because it's Pesach, and I personally find Yiddish to be a pretty cool language. It's got some nice sounds, nice music, and a lot of cool words like schmuck, schmeckel, schmutz, and schlep. If you're interested in learning Yiddish, I have an entire article on how to learn Yiddish, and I'll link it below so you can get started. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Sei gesund.